Hi everyone, welcome back to another Simple Planes video. In this video, I'm going to show you all of the interior updates for the SWL-120. So, let's get started. In last week's video, I showed you all of the fuselage updates, and I said I would show you all of the interior updates in this week's video. As I mentioned in my last video, I've been on holiday for the last 4 weeks, which means I wasn't able to make any videos, but it also means, since I flew to where I was going, I got a first-hand look at the interior and also the cockpit. So I was able to model the interior, which I'll show you just now, and I was also able to look at the cockpit and get some good reference ideas from 2 different planes on what my cockpit was going to look like. So I'll start with the interior. If you've seen my, I think it was my second last video about the interior updates, you'll notice this current front galley looks a lot different from the previous front galley. That's because I had a chance to look at an actual galley, and I decided the one I originally modeled is completely different from what it looks like in real life. So the carts are not actually exposed anymore, we now have some doors. I think I should start at actually the back of the plane, because the back of the plane is where I started modeling this. And also the galley cart itself has been completely redesigned. I left the general frame and the wheels alone, but I changed the front. So instead of having some drink trays in it, it actually has just a door. That is because on the galley carts I looked at on my flight, there were no just exposed drink trays. They all had doors on the carts. So this is the real galley. We also have this rear door, and you've seen this in my whatever it was video. I left the lavatory doors alone. Those are the same from the original. I just moved them around a bit. Here we have the main rear galley. This is the rear galley, which is on a 787. It's slightly modified, of course, because I'm not making a replica. I'm also not including a bunch of seemingly random details on the rear galley, so I just made it simple but somewhat detailed. Well, a lot detailed, I guess. They have 3 different types of compartments. These are all where the galley carts go. Everything in here else has a locking mechanism so it doesn't open up in flight. And none of these doors open. This is to save time for me spent modeling, and also to save on performance, because there's a lot of meshes I'd have to do to have all the carts in there. So these can't open, you can't click anything. Nothing works in here, but if I made every single thing functional and every single thing detailed, that'll just be impossible because of performance limitations. Anyway, so we have these 3 compartments. There's the galley cart doors. These are some sort of oven. So I didn't put like the buttons and screens on them, but this would be some sort of timer screen. This is the keypad for how long you want to put the oven on for, or temperature, I guess. Some dials, and then I think it's like an exhaust grill or something. And then it's like a handle and a latch. And then this is copied a bunch of times. Up here, I didn't actually get to see what was in here, but it looked like a storage compartment, so I just put simple door, simple handle, 2 latches. Just copied that a bunch of times. And then in here we have a simple sink with a tap. I should probably put in a system for this galley cart to have the camera moving around so you can actually look forward and move the cart, so I have to just go backwards. Anyway, so here's a reverse view of the interior. And also, one thing you'll notice here, this wasn't present on my last video, but these are the indicators which tell you the row you're in and also the seat number. So let's say you have a ticket for a seat, I don't know, 38H. You would know 38 somewhere at the back, so you go back to the back. Then you'd see 38, and then you'd be on this aisle. Seat H. This is the aisle and this is the window. Seat H would be the middle seat, lucky you. Then you take the seat. Just a simple detail again. And this is all 4 labels, so 1 label for all of this, then 1 label for all of this, and so on for the other side. Here we have our first middle galley. The galley here in between economy and first class, other than the front galley, they're all the exact same model. They're just copied. Also present on only the middle galleys is a drink dispenser of some sort. This is a tank, and I guess it'll store water or something, probably just water, really. What else would you put in a tank? Anyway, so you have that, then you have a simple handle. This is the same, these are the same, they don't open. Then we have, again, a sink. I also forgot to mention about the back. There are 2 toilets, back here, here, and here. And no, these do not have an interior, these are just doors which go to nothing. In between economy and first class, as I mentioned back there, there's a galley. There's also 3 toilets, one at the right, one in the middle, and one at the left. This galley is exactly the same, as I just mentioned. Then we have first class. The only change in first class has been the reduction of the height of these barriers, just to make first class a little more spacious. And also, something I forgot to mention, I don't know why, well, it's probably because I just got used to it being there. Anyway, it's these passenger signs. There's no smoking and fasten seatbelts, and these do in fact light up. In the final version, this will be controlled by a switch in the cockpit, but for now I just have it on activation groups. And also, when I reduced the height of these barriers, I had to remove this top screen. I don't think it would actually serve any purpose, so it doesn't really matter. And at the very front of the plane, there's the toilet here, toilet there, and then the front galley. This front galley is different to the other 2 galleys. The general layout and look is the same. However, here, you can click a hidden button here, which opens these latches and then opens the doors to reveal 2 galley carts. This one you cannot do anything with, but this one you have some controls and you can move it around the plane. Also, if you click this cart, it pokes this cart, so you don't have to keep trying to fidget with the controls to just get it poked. You just click that and it zeroes the position, therefore poking the cart. And no, this cart has no collisions of any kind. Why? Because it'll take a while to code them. And then I'm pretty sure you've seen Ultimate Class. You just click these 2 buttons, well, one for each side, to open these doors. Yeah, it's like an Ultimate Class. It's like first class, but even better, you got a bed. So each of these, like, 2 different rooms could seat 2 people each, so you can have a total of 4 people getting Ultimate Class on a single flight. You have a bed for 2, and then you have a seat for 2. And then, that brings us to the cockpit. I think I mentioned the windshield wipers in the first video. However, if I didn't, they're there, and they work with Activate 2, which will be changed to overhead panel windshield wiper controls in the final version. And now we're at the cockpit, this actually transitions us into the cockpit. So, the cockpit's not currently in this file because of it being in development, and it also has so many variables, currently approximately 500. I can easily just transfer those variables. It's just it's currently in development, and there's also several files I have to assemble for the cockpit itself, and also transitioning variables from like the fuselage standalone controls to the cockpit. For example, all these lights. I have some variables which are set to activate 8, but on the cockpit version, of course, those would be actual switches in the cockpit. So I just decided to leave the cockpit where it is. I also noticed in my watch time in my last video, a lot of you liked my no commentary landing video of the fuselage, so I will do a takeoff one of those. Yeah, I'm terrible at flying planes. That wasn't very controlled after takeoff, and also I turned onto the runway way too far to the right. Anyway, hope you enjoyed that. So now, the cockpit. The last video mentioning the cockpit was my interior updates video. That was a few months ago. And since then, a lot has changed in the cockpit. So first of all, I've started splitting the cockpit itself into separate files. This one's the center panel. And I'm also going to just about completely redo the entire cockpit. Some controls like the throttle quadrant will stay the same, but others, such as the flight computers, have been completely overhauled. The center panel used to have just these controls and then the passenger side controls. However, I decided these were not realistic enough, so I decided to completely redo them. This plane is somewhat based off the 787 for the cockpit, and the 787 has a digitalized radio control system. I couldn't find a name for these computers here, so I decided to call them RMCs, or radio management computers. Similar to how these computers here are called flight management computers. That is a real name, but RMC is not a real name. So the old controls had similar functions to these computers, except it was a lot more spread out. So you had giant buttons compared to what it should be. You could enter frequencies, you can write frequencies, and you could change and read frequencies. And that would have worked for what I needed it to do, but I wanted it to be ultra realistic. So I decided to completely just remove these and then start from scratch. There are 4 screens on this radio management computer. But very high frequency, and navigation, that's for your ILS. And then a transponder screen. So I want to start at very high frequency. There's this input box at the bottom. There's a similar input box at the top. I'll get to this one just in a sec. So you can enter in any number, so you can, 109.5, and then you could write that to a standby frequency. So the point of the decimal is to allow you to not have to write 3 numbers before you can get across to the decimals. So if, let's say I have, 12, that's not like the actual frequency, but it's, anyway. So you have 12, then you click this, and it moves to the middle, and then you can write anything else, and you can write that. To swap it from the standby to active, you just click this button. And the coding behind this is like really complex. It took me quite a few days to develop. I'm not even going to try and explain how it works, but it's like really, really advanced. It's also really, really long, has over 500 variables. The high frequency screen is exactly the same as very high frequency, except there's 10 new possible frequencies you can tune in. Same for nav, so I'm not going to go over all of that. And about the number pad, it's like a number pad, and then you have a clear function, which just zeroes the input. The transponder screen. Transponder is a device on an aircraft which is used to basically identify yourself to air traffic control. So you input 4 digits, and then air traffic control sees those 4 digits moving around on the radar screen, and they'll know, since they told that, let's say your aircraft, to squawk or transmit that frequency, numbers, I guess. They'll know it's you. So let's say we have 1234 as our frequency. We type that in and then put that into the code. I guess you could technically put in a 6-digit code, but I'm not going to try and fix that. That'll take a while to fix for my number input system. And the mode, I have no idea what the modes are. I just copied this off an image I saw of an airliner transponder mode. So this one would, I think, was standby. I have no idea what this means, what this means, but I just put them in there. And also, each of these different RMCs can display different screens. So this one can be displaying very high frequency information, while this one can be on the transponder screen, for example. And the same will happen for the top FMCs. We'll get to those in a bit. And then you have the radio controls. This is currently in development, but in the final version you would have 5 different frequencies you can be listening to at the same time. I would have 5 buttons for very high frequency, for high frequency, and for nav. Then I think some other ones. These will be like sort of like an audio mixer. So let's say you have 2 different aircraft transmitting on 2 different frequencies, and you are listening to both of those frequencies. And let's say you had both of those frequencies active, then you would hear both of those voices from the pilots, at the same time. The 787 had 3 different radios for very high frequency and so on. I decided to just do 5. Why? Because that's how many rows I had. I guess it's not like really realistic, but I think it's good enough. My aircraft doesn't exactly have to be based on the 787. Yeah, so all of these controls would be for the captain's headset, and then the right controls would be for the first officer's headset. And then I guess I would also have maybe some controls in the middle for the cockpit speakers or something. I'm not going to talk about this because you've seen it before. It's very simple. You can just drag any lever, you can move things, and that's really all there is to it. So up here we have the 2 flight management computers. The left one is what I used to call a finished and very realistic flight management computer a few months ago. And all you can do with it is select waypoints. Very useful, isn't it? And none of these buttons work. The one on the right is my new definition of a flight management computer. Every single button on this keypad works. You can type any string you want. And on this one, you can also have a backspace. So if I type, so if I'm trying to type, say, hello, but I mistype, I can backspace. That'll type what I want to do. I guess there's no real point, because it's like 6 characters, but anyway, you have that. You also have a space, for whatever reason, I don't know, you just have it. And this is nowhere near completion. All you can do is type in an input to do nothing, and then you can select different pages. But every single page here will be functional just like a real one. This flight manager computer will also be managing waypoints, which on the old center panel were managed by this thing. I don't know why I'd have a separate giant buttons panel just to control 6 waypoints. But in here, you can go into waypoints and you would select, I don't know, custom waypoints, then you'd have a list of waypoints and you could set the value of them. I'm pretty sure we're making a video on making this functional, so make sure you subscribe for that. And that's really it for the center panel. And this is the main file for the cockpit. This features the old center panel. There hasn't really been many changes to the general, just what you see here. I've done a bit of bug fixes and some back-end coding for the actual functions of these controls. So the APU now auto starts, so you can turn the APU master switch to on. You click the start APU button, and then the APU will automatically start starting. Previously you had to hold this button until it all started. And also, unless the bleed out is like the engine is started or the APU started, the computer will, like, at least when I'm pretending as a computer, will not feed bleed air to the main duct unless that engine or APU is fully started. I have engine 1 and engine 2 bleed air active. They'll just display pressure, but it will not actually put the engine bleed air into the duct pressure. I also have the new engines put into the cockpit. Up until a few days ago I had the old engine variables put in. These engines have all the new variables, which I've worked on in my last few videos, so I had to completely redo that. I also left the engines in front of the cockpit just so I can have a more visual effect. So if I turn the engine dial to start, the engine will draw some pressure to start, because it's doing an air start. Then it will start to spool up, and it'll display some information on the cockpit screens, which I'll talk about very shortly. So that will start to spool up, then you can give it some fuel, then it'll continue to spool up. I guess you can sort of see the engine here, how far it is. I can do the same for engine number 2. I've also done, I think, a tiny bit of work on the autopilot panel. Just moved around these buttons and stuff. I also added a landing gear lever. There's going to be some indicators and the controls around this too. We're just trying to turn on avionics. There you go. These are what I was originally going to have for the flight management computers. Just this. The idea for this was to have another small computer in between these two computers, which would control a flight plan. But I can do that all off the single flight manager computer because it's more compact. I guess during all this development, I never really thought how I was going to explain how to fly this plane. To solve that problem, I think I'll make a full manual, like a full PDF with a lot of pages, detailing every single switch of every single function. So that is really it for the cockpit. I can't really think of anything else to explain. But yeah, I forgot about the cockpit screens. These are still set up using the old engine variables and the old wings even. But the general idea is the same. That's going to be redone. I have a brand new primary flight display I can put on that, which I'll show you very soon. I think I'm going to get rid of this mini map and then put a different map which displays all the waypoints on this screen. And I might change these column style engine thrust displays to be more like circles. I do like this function though. It's just really old, and the new engine variables actually have this smoothing effect built into them. I had to code the smoothing effect myself just for the engine thrust displays. I also didn't understand different engine measurements when I made this. So this one has engine thrust and EGT, or exhaust gas temperature. But now I have things like N1 and N2, and EGT is a real thing, so I'll put that in. I haven't really worked on the cockpit displays for a really long time though, like the screens. So this is an aircraft called the SWL-120, again fictional. This is a plane which I was trying to use like a test for something else which I'll explain in a few videos. And it's basically where you have a camera, and you can attach it to something, and then you can control it. This is still a very much work in progress, but anyway, I have this display. I didn't make this, but it's a very useful display. And this is all a single label. And I'm going to use this for my primary flight displays. I just need to do a few modifications to it, like adding autopilot stuff like target heading, target altitude, which currently is just set to altitude. But the general display is there and it works great. So we're going to use this. And with that, that brings this video to an end. In my next video, I'll be working on the cockpit with coding that flight management computer. I might try and even explain how it even works. I can barely understand how it works now. So I hope you enjoyed. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!